crazy, but I didn't know he would.
How did it run after that, Cat?
It helped it. It didn't spin as much coming off the turn.
Welcome to another high-octane episode of Southern Dirt Motorsports.
My name is Jeff Walker, and we're doing the Southern Dirt Motorsports podcast this afternoon with the First Lady of Dirt, Miss Gilda Cantrell. She's in the center here. On my left is Hall of Fame, newly inducted Hall of Fame member, Randall Davis. And to my right is Gary Lorance. And we're going to get started this afternoon by talking to Gilda. Why don't we just start in the beginning, Miss Gilda? Tell us the first time you ever met Peanut.
Oh, that's a tale in itself. We went to high school together.
Okay.
I knew him, but I didn't know him. He had a car, and that was something. All the boys didn't have cars, but every once in a while you'd see one. But he had a Jeep to start with, and then he popped up with a little slick Studebaker. He was going with somebody else. I don't even remember now who it was. But we went to a drive-in theater. Not with him. I was with some girls. And they put me in the trunk. You had to slip in, places every once in a while. And 2 or 3 of us was in the trunk. And when we got inside the drive-in theater, this car pulled up beside, so they said, and he opened the trunk and helped me out. That's when I first met him.
First met Peanut, okay. That's a great introduction.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
I guess.
And so y'all dated and eventually married in
55.
In 1955.
I wasn't out of high school. I was still had my senior year, although I didn't need the senior year. I had already finished high school, but I wanted to graduate with my class, so I stayed. Mm-hmm. He went into the service, ended up in Alaska, and that's where he first started racing.
That was his first introduction to racing. Okay.
First time. When he came back from Alaska, he started racing in Winchester.
I see.
And that was in 57. He was in Alaska in 56. Came down there and raced in 57. 58 and 59. He built a car they called the Tank. That was his first car. I don't know who he raced for when he first started in Winchester. But he decided to build a car, and he built a car and called it the Tank. After that, he built Circle 2.
What was the story behind that one?
34 Ford 5-window coupe. Prettiest little car you ever saw. He brought it home for our anniversary present and said, "This is going to be my race car." And he tore that pretty little car up and built a race car out of it. But it was built like a brick, house. And it was his roll bars. He had a cage. It was all around him and down the back of him. It was a safe car, and the seat belts that he put in it was out of an airplane, which has a quick release on it, which was a safe car. Most guys didn't have that kind of seat belt.
Right.
There was a lot of them that just used a belt like a man would wear, to hold them in the car. There was nothing safe.
All these cars back then were very primitive race cars. I mean,
most of them came out of the junkyard.
Right.
I mean, all the cars were built out of junkyards. You didn't go and buy parts then. Nobody could afford them.
Right. And recently, they had a find. And Randall, where was the cars that was your car and Gary's dad?
This was due to this podcast. We found those in Moss, Tennessee.
In Moss.
And someone put the pictures of them on the internet. The people that owned them, the McLaren family, I think maybe it was, or some of their relatives. And I sort of recognized Gary's dad's car. I sort of thought it was, but I didn't recognize the other one. And as we, when we went to pick them up and I started looking at them, that's when I discovered one of them was mine, and I hadn't seen the car in over 50 years. So that was a nice find there.
Absolutely.
But it's you
So-
guys.
Roy Freeze, you're restoring this car, right?
Yeah, I've even got one of the original engines I used in it when I was racing, but
Oh,
I'm,
wow.
Wonderful.
restored. It'll
That's
have the
really
right
nice.
sound again.
Yep.
It'll be fun.
And then
I-
Gary's working on his. Absolutely.
And I get that car first ran on Gilda and Peanuts racetrack. That's where that car first saw dirt.
Yeah.
It's where it first got wrecked. It's where it won its first heat race and feature. So
Our car was the 414, which Kim drove it.
Yeah.
Peanut drove it,
Wow.
for a while. So I'm trying to rebuild it and get it back kind of like it was.
We looked for Circle 2 for years trying to find it, but come to find out, after we built the track, after we built it, and he didn't want to run his own car on the track because people, had something to say about it, but he sold it to Raymond Stiles and Wesley, Cat Stiles. And I didn't know that till I heard Cat's talk about it. I remembered him selling it, but I didn't remember to whom he had sold it. And it was to Raymond and Cat. And I guess the reason we can't find it is Cat said he rolled it down the front straightaway, so it may have been totally torn up. I don't know. But we really did try to find the car to see if we could get it rebuilt.
And you said this
before
car
Cat
was
died.
built by John Ledbetter
Uh-huh.
in Shelbyville,
In
Tennessee.
Shelbyville. Well, after we bought the pretty little car and kind of took it apart to make a racetrack, they worked on it here. Now, John had a motor that we bought from him.
Oh, okay.
Now, he built motors all the time. But your dad and Laverne Jones and, Willie Carpenter all worked on that car all the time. Junior Miller, that was another one that worked
yeah.
on it. You remember? I know you grew up with him.
Yeah.
hey, if we could, one of the reasons we here with Miss Gilda, her and Peanut Kenneth, that she knew him as, the rest of us knew him as Peanut Cantrell. They brought racing to this area. The only
Exactly.
track that was around anywhere close was Winchester.
Winchester.
But Gilda and Peanut, they had the guts somehow to build a racetrack out here. And Gilda, if you will, tell us how that came to be, because
Well-
we owe racing in this area to you and Peanut.
He and Bernard Smith,
That is a name we'll never forget.
Johnny Jack. I guess he was about 16, if I had to guess about it, because I know 18 is what they required them to run to be able to race at that time.
Some of us looked older than we were.
Well,
And I had one of them on my back for a long time.
come here, Cat.
And but folks, that's not Cat Styles.
That cat chose me to come live here, and he just lives here. That's all there are to it. But I don't even know now where we were.
Gilda has always been able to attract cats. We were talking about how you and Peanut brought the first racetrack to this area.
Okay, that was in 1960. Now, this has been a long time ago, and I don't remember everything, but he and Bernard decided they had been going to Winchester to race, and he decided that they ought to build one up here. So they were going to go in together, which they started out to do. Bernard didn't like manual labor.
That's why he became
just
an attorney.
didn't work
Yeah.
right, and he was going to school at that time. So we bought him out. They went together, but then we bought him out. And Coon Barnes had a bulldozer and a what is that other?
Road grader.
Road grader, and that's what they started with. That. Now Kenneth could take a slide rule and figure out, and a transit, and he could figure out anything he wanted to do. He could draw it out. It was just one of the things that he could do without even giving it a thought. He knew what he wanted to build, and he drew it out and asked Coon if he would come and help. He had a lot of buddies, and it didn't cost all that much because they wanted something here for people. So he and Coon did all that they had to do and built that thing out there. The first time was in September of '60 is when we first started racing. And at that time, none of the boys around here had a car. But that first race, we had the Alabama gang. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't even know who that is.
Donnie and Bobby Allison.
Bobby and Donnie Allison
Farmer.
and Red Farmer. And I can't even remember who else came with that group. But anyway, they came up and would race. That was what they came to do, to help us get the track started. And we had people from Chevrolet. I don't remember, let's see, Jimmy Griggs out of Nashville. Marty Robbins came up here and raced with us several times. And we raced with them in Nashville at that Sulphurdale
Yes.
Sulphurdale racetrack. And he would come over there and race on Saturday night and then go back to the Grand Ole Opry House. I know one night we were down there and he and Kenneth were in the same heat. Marty always drove with his hand on the window of the door, which was a scary thing for anybody to do.
Well, you had
That's
to
what
do
he
something
did.
to
You
hold
had to-
yourself in.
exactly. And they were running side by side in between number 1 and number 2, and they got together and kind of jumped out of that car quicker than anybody I ever saw. He was so afraid he had hit Marty's arm and had ruined his. And Marty climbed out and was just laughing about it. He thought it was funny to be in the wreck with whatever it was, but he was such a kind man. He was just a regular old guy that played the guitar. That's all
Marty
he
could
was.
have won a lot of
He
races
most certainly
that Marty didn't. And he was asked about that one day, and he said one career at a time
At
was
a time.
enough, and his was in country music. But
He could have made a tremendous race
he
car
was a
driver.
really good driver.
He really could have, but he, like I said, one at a time, and he was a guitar player.
And you and Peanut, you always had good order. You was organized at the track. Where
That was
did you
his doing.
Where did you come up with the help that you had?
Oh my!
Now I know you
Just
were
people that he knew, people that wanted to do things. We had a pit steward, Bill Byers, and we had Bob Swall was another guy that was down in the pits. In fact, I think he stayed in the pits and helped get all the cars out all the time. And Bob, he knew what he was doing. We had a flagman, Judge McClooney. We call him Judge, but his name is Judd, Judd. And his wife drove in her powder puff races. Her name was Dot, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Judd was one of those guys that just the sound of his voice,
Oh my!
you would do what Judd told you to do.
Exactly. He was a
Just-
big man, and he, like you said, when he opened his mouth, you listened to him. But we'd met him somewhere, maybe probably in Winchester or in Nashville, one of the tracks, I don't know, but he came to flag for us.
He flagged in Winchester and
Yeah.
Nashville at the
Oh,
same
he went
time. He went everywhere
He
flagging.
went everywhere flagging, but he liked to flag up here for us. We had Ivy Hillis was an announcer that we had that was really good. Red Safley did
Yeah,
some
he was
announcing.
with the radio station, I think, WBMC maybe.
Probably. Tom Miller from BMC made our spots for the radio to get people to come in. When Count decided he wanted to build a track here, he wanted this county to have something to go to. We didn't have anything here for people, really. There wasn't. And people didn't make much money. 20 cent, 30 cent gas, and 25 cents an hour to work, 50 cents an hour, you were lucky to get it. And if you made 75 cents an hour, you were in hog heaven. I mean, it was just, money was, $10 was like $100. I mean, it just is not.
You always played a major part in the racetrack. You were the scorekeeper,
I did
right?
scorekeeper.
GB Green was in on that.
Scorekeeper.
I've got
And
a-
we did it by hand.
I've got to tell you this story too. Gilda outlawed 3 numbers on a car. If you showed up, I think that's how come Earl became 14 instead of
414.
But if you showed up and you had 3 numbers on a car,
Exactly.
it had to become a 2-number car.
It's too hard to write, and you did. Our score sheet was about the size of this piece of paper, and you, as they came around in front of you had to write those numbers down. And 2 numbers and 20 cars coming around pretty doggone fast, we thought at the time.
Yeah.
Was hard to get down. That's why we required 2 numbers, and people became.
But Skinny McDonald won the first race,
He
right?
He won the first
Tell
race.
us why you're mad at him.
He took my checkered flag.
And you had made
And to
those.
this day, I assume he's passed away, but he still has, and I never could get the flag back. I had made all the flags, and a checkered flag is not that easy to sew together to, have out there. So, but he took it and we made another one. That was
that-
fun.
oh,
Skinny was a very prominent driver at Winchester.
From
Wherever
Winchester.
Skinny showed up at, he was a guy you were going to have to beat.
You did. I think he was number 5.
Skinny 5.
That's exactly right.
Skinny
Is that
5.
right? That's right, wasn't it?
Yep.
But he's also a good friend. Bernard got in a little trouble down there one night, and we needed somebody to help bail him out. That's just all there are to it. Skinny stepped up, and he says, "This boy's fine, let him go, don't worry about it, I'll take care of everything." That's how Bernard's mom and daddy found out that he'd been racing so much.
And that's the first of the start of the Johnny Jack
Of the
era.
Johnny Jack. He started running under Johnny Jack. His daddy had promised him a new Thunderbird, which Bernard wanted a Corvette, if he would quit racing. So he did quit racing. Bernard did. But Johnny Jack decided to run anyway. And they knew it because his mama would call and say, "How did Bernard do last night?" Or was Bernard safe last night?
So he wasn't pulling no one.
He wasn't pulling anybody's leg, but he still got his car. That was one of the things.
But was a cast of characters, the whole bunch of guys were.
Oh,
And y'all
my.
had figure 8 racing and
We had I
like,
don't remember.
kind of
who
run
all.
through the schedule of events. Like, did you run
Well,
semi-features?
we
heat
ran
races?
3 heats and a semi for the guys that had not won anything at all. And then we ran a feature, and the feature was 25 laps. The features, I think, you might remember more about that, was they 12, 15 laps.
The feature was 25 laps.
Yeah, but
and the
the-
semi was 12 laps.
All right, what was the
The heat race was 10 laps.
10 laps, okay. I just can't remember all of it. But we did have a lot of fun. The race crowd is like a family. You're all just real close until you get on the track. When you get on the track, everybody's one for all, and
Well,
that's it.
one of the worst things can happen to you is getting beat by your best friend.
Yeah, I guess so, because that happened between me, Earl, and Kenneth all the time. I didn't realize the camaraderie those two had until later.
Yeah, they was best friends in the world.
And-
Till
but
they got
the
that
worst.
racetrack.
The best but the worst, that's about it.
Well, tell us a little episode about you going to Daytona. I know you had painted up with friends with
Okay.
Bill France Sr.
Bill France,
And
we went down there when they were building the track. And I can't remember if it was right after they paved it or right before they paved it. We had a soda, a Groucho, I guess is what they called them then, running Groucho cars. But Bill asked him if he wanted to ride around the track and before it opened, and he did. And that was a thrill to go around Daytona. That's a big place.
it is a big
It's a
place.
big place.
And that was before it's paved. It was
That was-
pretty big, wasn't it?
It was big, but it was so much fun, and it was so kind of him to even consider letting us get on the track, much less drive around it. But I count you a lot of people that are now, NASCAR is 75 years old,
Just turned
Okay.
75.
And it's just turned. So we're 10 years out from that. We're like 65 years. And he knew an awful lot of those people that were in that first 75 group, then that goes a long way back to have friends that you can
Last
still
that long.
last that long, because the last time I think they were at the new Nashville track when it first opened. I don't remember when that was, but Red Farmer was up here, and he and Kenneth were down there together. I didn't go to that track, but he and a group of boys down there. But Red Farmer was there, and they sat down and rehashed a lot of things that happened all during this beginning of time. And I'm so glad that he got to see some of those people. And Donnie and Bobby was down there at that time too. And
Well, you telling the story about when you all opened the Speedway, how Kenneth always, big-hearted like he was, and being the promoter that he was, he wanted more race cars. So
Yes.
he enabled guys like Cat Stiles, like you say, Raymond Stiles, to drive his
to
race
be
car.
able to drive.
And most people won't let you sit in your race
That's
car, much less
exactly right.
race. So,
But Raymond was the one that first, he turned it over to him to race first. But then I guess Cat got in it after he, I don't know how that deal went down. I have no earthly idea. I didn't ever question. When he said he wanted to do something and it was going to take so much, I never questioned it. I just went along with whatever he wanted to do. We always said if it's worth doing, it's worth doing together. And that's how we stayed together.
Peanut was
So-
a great promoter.
Oh, he was a
besides
promoter.
a racer, always in the newspaper. There's still, since Steve started this Facebook thing, there's still so many old paper clippings and of the races, even back then. I mean, that are still out there.
Yeah.
That people have saved or in an archives or whatever. And he constantly kept the racetrack in the spotlight.
He wanted it that way because it brought people in and it gave people like y'all's parents to
Absolutely.
run.
But
to
it gave
do
them a
something.
place
Gave a
to-
place to go
To show their skills too.
Exactly.
You know, how good can you fix this car? Can I
And
outrun?
they could. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it. Whenever I don't know who all did race, Earl and Billy Joe Slatton and Don Hobbs and Bobby Stevens, and I can't even think
Howard
of
Powers.
Howard Powers. When they started racing, who would have thought those guys would have built a car and got out there and raced and had such a good time if they did? Sterling
Well,
Marlin was another one that
Yeah,
was.
and Cuckoo come up.
Cuckoo came up here all the time, and Sterling and Scott, my oldest son, were the same age. And they played out at the track when they were about 5, 6 years old, I guess. And I guess it was Ivy that was on the PA set and said, anybody wants to buy a cup of sawdust, we got a couple of boys down here. Those two kids, Sterling and Scott, had gotten them a Coca-Cola thing and put paper cups in it, and filled it up with sawdust. Was going through the stands selling it for a nickel a cup. I was so embarrassed. I thought, here a child is picking up sawdust, trying to sell it to everybody. But everybody took it as a good joke, and it was fun. But to think that we grew up, and you all grew up with these boys that went on to NASCAR.
Sterling's a two-time
And he's a
Daytona
two-timer. I mean, he
champion.
just
So it all started right out at Macmillan.
right out here at Macmillan Speedway. That was the whole thing. And after we built this speedway, Macmillan Speedway, there was one that started in Sparta or up in there somewhere. Little tracks started popping up everywhere.
Burgess Falls.
Burgess Falls was
And
another one.
Cookville built
Cookville.
one. Because you went up there and helped them show them how to score.
I went to each track that whenever they'd start to build it, they'd ask us to come up and teach them how to score and how to keep up with all of it and what to do whenever somebody had a question. And you better believe every Saturday night somebody questioned how or why am I not the winner or the second place or whatever. And we'd have it on paper and said, right there it is, and if you can change it, fine. But what is said here what we say is the way it's going to be, no matter how angry, and they were a few that did get angry, but that was okay too.
Tell us about
Gilda.
the time you felt threatened over that, you know.
Yes, I think that was up at Burgess Falls, if I'm not mistaken. There was a big dispute over who had won, and they were going to come up on the stand and take care of whoever was up there. But I thought, okay, I've got one lick. If he comes up those steps, I've got one lick. And if he wants to try that, that's fine. If not, but some kind guy, I don't even remember his name, stopped him at the bottom of the steps and said, "You're not going up. This is the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be paid." We didn't pay much. We didn't have a whole lot of money to pay, but they got a percentage of everything that came through that.
Well, it wasn't so much about the money. It was just where I beat you.
Well, that's true. But they did appreciate the trophies and the money.
Yeah. And speaking of the trophies, they were so unique. You know, piston rods and pistons and,
All right,
And a
if you-
bricks.
bricks.
Bricks, yeah. But that was, Kenneth made some of those, most of them, in fact.
Yeah.
He made them. If you blew a motor, you got one with a busted piston on it,
Yeah.
you know, or the brick, and I don't remember what it was for, but he would come up with ideas. He was a great promotional guy. I tell you, he could come up with some things that most people wouldn't even think about.
When you guys started the old racetrack out here, you had a pretty good set of rules. I've wondered, where did y'all come up with that set of rules that cars had to be built by?
That was NASCAR ruling. We tried to follow NASCAR's ruling. It didn't always go over too well, but we did try to follow their rules. You needed to be a certain age, and you had to have a certain size engine, and that's when you went to the junkyard and got most of your parts out of the junkyard. You didn't just go and say, "Hey, I'm going to go buy this." I bought Kenneth a helmet one time. His first, well, no, I guess it was his second. A Bell 500 from Honest Charlie.
That was the most expensive thing we had to start with.
$50.
Yes, and I believe that's more than we had in the car, probably.
Probably was, but $50 was hard to come by.
Yes.
We had an Honest Charlie in Chattanooga and one in Nashville. I got this one in Nashville because I didn't know how to get around in Chattanooga. I didn't know how to drive in Nashville. But that was one of his first anniversary ones. That was when we were still running in Winchester, I believe, though. And one night he flipped the car end over end, and he had that helmet on, thank goodness. And they were going to cut it. They were going to cut the chin strap. And I remember, I don't know who was in the pits with him at that time. Could have been your daddy. But they said, "Don't cut that strap on that chin strap on that helmet."
C.H. Hullett, when he did his interview, he talked about that he borrowed a helmet from you and Peanut. That's why that he raced out there. And
It wasn't that helmet, though.
no, he said you wouldn't let him have that one.
No, it wasn't that one. It was his other helmet that looked. It was a race helmet, but it looked like what the old football helmets used to look like, you know. And I wished I still had those, but I don't. I had two boys, and they went through all that kind of stuff pretty quick, so I didn't get to keep any of that.
Well,
kind
the
of
first,
stuff.
I can remember most of them, the first one looked like a polo helmet. A lot of them had.
Yeah.
Or it looked like it just got off a horse or something, got in the car.
It did. It had that shape more than anything else, I guess, but there wasn't much protection in that.
No, and back in, like you said, nobody had no money, really had
No.
that kind of money to spend on that stuff, but
No.
it was that
But
most expensive thing.
Each accident that has happened in NASCAR has made an improvement in the next generation.
That's exactly right.
I mean, every wreck
That's really
that was,
the way we had to learn.
That's the only
safety
way.
is somebody would get hurt or somebody would get close to get hurt and maybe get killed.
Exactly.
And you would try to do something to prevent that from happening to you and your buddies. And
Well,
that's how safety rules
look
got
what the
incorporated.
helmets are now.
Yes.
And that was from Earnhardt's wreck.
Yes. The Hans device is
Yes,
a big part of it.
all of that was from the Earnhardt wreck because he didn't wear a face covering at all. He wanted goggles. Of course, we don't know exactly what happened in that wreck, but from what has happened from that wreck, with the Hans and with the extra helmets and with the seat belts, oh my gracious, that they have now than what we started out with, came from that one particular wreck.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to say that you had to have a bad wreck to get an improvement, but if you don't know what
You don't know
what
you
to
don't know
fix-
what to
what-
fix
what
until
to
it
fix.
happens.
The racing's changed and
It has.
evolved so much into what it is today, but it
Well-
all started with you guys.
Well, I
So-
feel like, I hope that people realize that what we started here in Warren County helped build what we have today.
Gilda and Peanut were really ahead of their time.
Yes,
in
they were.
safety rules and building the track too.
They, when they started, I know that they was cars showed up out there, and they would look at them and say, "Hey, you got to have some safety equipment."
Yeah.
And y'all really
Yeah.
looked after that well.
We really tried to insist, of course they talked about having one roll bar right over your head. We tried to stick with those rules, to build a cage around you in place of just one bar, because that was not going to help if there was a wreck. And people wanted to see wrecks.
Yeah.
We had a crash bond that would come to the tracks. Any track that Crash went to, you could depend on there would be some crash. They weren't bad, but they were exciting enough that made people want to come back and see what you had. And if you could get Crash to come to your tracks, which we got him several times, we had some good crashes. That's where he got his name.
With that, then, we're going to go ahead and end this episode of Southern Dirt Motorsports Podcast. And we ask that you like this and subscribe to it. That's kind of what keeps us going. Until next time, we'll see you guys.